10,000 or so so-called undervotes that plaintiff Vice President Gore's lawyers talk about, did the canvassing board manipulate these ballots physically?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to counsel's constant use of the implication of manipulate. It's kind of hard to do a manual recount.
Rephrase the question.
Well, Your Honor, I thought I'd made clear that manipulate doesn't mean anything
Don't use
fraudulent.
the word anymore.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Judge. Did the canvass board members touch the ballots with their hands and move the ballot around in a flexible manner?
The ballots, when they arrived up to the canvassing board, came in the envelopes that were described with a precinct number. And Mr. Leahy would be the first generally to open the envelope, and he would be the first to, if you will, handle or grasp the ballot. My observation of what I watched him do when I was out on the floor on the two-day period and when I went back and sat as an observer behind the canvassing board was that in many instances he would just first look at the ballot and then pass it over to Judge King, either with a no vote comment or whatever the particular vote was. In many instances, however, I would observe the first order that Mr. Leahy would do would be to hold it up in such a way as to examine the plane on the back of the ballot, and then in many instances similarly grab the front of the ballot and then put kind of a wave, if you will, in the ballot.
All right, sir, I think we've cleared up what I meant by manipulate the ballots. It's the wave that I was referring to. Did you observe anything else about the physical handling of the ballots as it might relate to how the condition those ballots might be in today somewhere here under lock and key in Tallahassee?
Well, the handling of them, of at least all the ones that have been counted, have been subjected to a lot of mishandling, if you will, to the extent that they've been pounded, they've been twisted, they've been moved around, rubbed up against each other, and I think to many degrees, to the extent that new chat has accumulated, those ballots have been substantially changed.
Your Honor, I'm going to move that answer be stricken. This witness has no basis for making a conclusion that those ballots were in any way, shape, or form mishandled. They have been touched because a manual recount can only be done by hand.
May I respond, Your Honor?
All right, yes, sir.
Your Honor and Mr. Greenberg, the point is not that there has been a purposeful mishandling by the Miami County-Dade Board at all, or that they've done anything wrong. But we've been through an extraordinary period over the last several weeks where these ballots have been handled and handled.
I understand.
That's the point of the testimony.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I understand that. And the witness can answer if the witness has any particular knowledge about it, if he observed how they were packing them and this, that, and the other. But if he didn't, all he's saying is that's just pure supposition.
Do you know this, sir, of your own observation, or is it just pure supposition?
In the course of the packing and repacking of these ballots, for example, on the 20th and the 21st, these ballots were removed from the trays on the 19th floor, repacked into a carrying case, transported to the 18th floor, where they were then taken out, placed on the counting tables, and in the course of that, whether by experience as card players or not, they're always banging them on the table, and there's just considerable, in the course of the packing and repacking, undue handling of those ballots.
Your Honor, I'm going to move that the answer be stricken. This gentleman...
Overruled.
Now, sir, I want to move to a little bit different question. I take it you were in a... Well, let me start over. I want to lead you. Did you observe the supervisors as they looked at some of these so-called undervotes on November 20 and 21?
I did on the...
Just a yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Was there any occasion in which you saw, counted as a vote for president, for anybody, Bush, Gore, a ballot that had a clear punch through it for one of the candidates and a dimple or indentation on the same ballot for another candidate?
Yes.
All right. So that ballot wasn't thrown out as being a spoiled ballot because you had 2 votes. Instead, you saw it counted as an accurate vote, correct?
Yes.
Who did it go for? Did it go for the dimple Chad or did it go for the clear punch?
It went for the clear punch.
Okay. Let me, sir, finish up by just asking you something about Plaintiff's Exhibit 31, which I believe I have over here. Your Honor, may I approach?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Your Honor, this is Plaintiff's Exhibit 31. It's in evidence. Excuse me, sir. And Mr. Spargo, here is Plaintiff's Exhibit 31. Do you see that this is the transcript of the hearing before the 3-member canvassing board of Miami-Dade County starting at 1:30 p.m. on November 22, 2000, after the Florida Supreme Court had ruled, I believe, the day before?
Yes, I see that. You're on the front page.
All right, sir. Let's take a quick look at page 24. And in particular, would you read line 6, starting on page 24, on through page 25, and that much so far right now. And if you'll read it carefully and slowly and indicate who's speaking among these county canvass board officials.
Beginning on page 24 at line 6, Judge King remarks, "Thank you, Mr. Young. I want to thank both representatives of their various parties for their persuasive and meaningful arguments here today. Mr. DeGrande, just one point of clarification. I know you all like to say that to us, so I'm going to say it to you."
Now let me stop you, and I'd like for you to jump actually to the next page, if you would, page 25, and start at line 12 to save time. Start at line 12 on page 25, and this is Judge King continuing to speak.
It became evidently clear this morning around 6:30, 7 o'clock, when there's a word that's not clear in my copy.
Looks like we were coming.
We were coming here to start our task for the 8 o'clock session, that was going to be, as David has already said, a physical impossibility because of time. You cannot count the remaining hand ballots in this county by Sunday. Therefore, the only alternative that this canvassing board had to meet the needs of the people and meet the needs of the parties was to try to adopt what was originally suggested and discussed in open forum with you present, Mr. Martinez present, I believe Mr. Geller and Mr. Coffey. But with that said, I do not, sir, disagree with you that it is probably and could be reasonably considered an impossibility for these 3 human beings for the next 48, that it might be impossible to do so. Mr. Young, I do not disagree that every attempt should be made to do so, but not at the expense, sir, and I hope you understand this, because the Republic is watching us, not at the expense of disenfranchising one voter. We have, it's blank there.
Could it be we have been going over, can't read it, just keep going.
We have been going that over and over again. Mr. Leahy has never suggested that. The canvassing board would never support that.
Could you go back? Mr. Lay never
Your
suggested
Honor,
what?
I'm just going to object to reading what's already in evidence. We've got lots of transcript portions we could read too. We're trying to move this along.
I tend to agree. I trust we're not going to read too much more.
This is it
All
for
right.
him, if he can just
All right.
continue reading this.
All right.
But if you'll go back, you missed a word. Mr. Leahy, what?
Mr. Leahy has never suggested that. The canvassing board would never support that. But at the same time, limitations from an hour-to-hour standpoint, with the risk that we could not certify a proper election on Sunday to the Secretary of State, would be a great travesty to our nation and to this country. So therefore, what I would like to do at this time is to ask the board to, now that we have had a fair opportunity to hear all of this, knowing the constraints and knowing where we have been, where we have come to, and where we may go, that we take another vote to decide whether or not this canvassing board may proceed at this time. What I'm going to do, since it is always the chairman's prerogative, I see some of our congressmen smiling. They know all about that. I'm going to vote first, and therefore I vote no. I believe we should stop at this time. We cannot meet the deadline of the Supreme Court of the state of Florida, and I feel that incumbent upon this canvassing board to count each and every ballot, and to not do a hand recount would potentially, Mr. DeGrande, not guarantee, but potentially, even under the proposed plan of this morning, could disenfranchise a segment of our community.
Let me stop you there. Did you observe both the morning and afternoon session of November 22?
I was there for each of the sessions.
What was proposed in the morning that Judge King was saying he was not going to go along with?
In the morning meeting was the cancellation of the manual recount provisions, and the board agreed to continue only the count of the 1,200 or whatever remained of the undercount ballots.
Well, what were you understanding Judge King to be voting no on at this time and what you're reading here?
Your Honor, I'm just going to object. Again, we've got a transcript. Now we're asking a Republican operative to interpret the transcript. This court can read a transcript and make an appropriate decision. That's what it means.
He was there, Your Honor, and is able to testify of his own knowledge. He observed it, but for clarity, for Your Honor's sake, it's not, unless you want to read several thousand pages of transcript in the next day or two, I think this would be helpful to you.
This gentleman wants me to. I'll sustain his objection.
Fine. Let's go to the next page, sir, page 28. And in particular, line 14 on page 28. Is this still Judge King speaking?
Your Honor, if I may object again and make the suggestion that we simply hand to you copies of the pages that we think are worth your special attention. He keeps wanting to read this.
Hear just the court.
I'm not going to be much longer, Your Honor.
What page you talking about?
There is a lot of objecting going on in this Leon County courtroom at this point. Let's go to Kate Snow, who is with David Cardwell in Tallahassee for an explanation. Kate?
Gene, that last gentleman was Kendall Coffey, but before that we have been hearing from Murray Greenberg several times. He is with the Miami-Dade Canvassing Board, basically trying to defend what the Canvassing Board did. They brought out these two witnesses, David Cardwell, they brought out these two witnesses now back-to-back, Thomas Spencer and Thomas Spargo, both Republican observers from Miami-Dade, trying to say that they didn't do the right thing down there.
Well, not only that, but they're also trying to show that the Bush campaign is trying to show that while the Canvassing Board may not have done everything perfectly, they still were within their bounds of their discretion. I think what Mr. Greenberg's been objecting to is some characterization of some of the members of the Canvassing Board taking certain positions that he didn't think the witness was in a position to be able to really say that. So I think what we're seeing now is an attempt to try to make the Canvassing Board look good on one hand, but at the same time recognizing it did some things that the Bush campaign didn't like.
A lot of talk about ballots being degraded, being pounded on tables from these Republican observers.
Which also goes to the point that they're saying these ballots have already been run through the machines 3 times. There was a partial manual recount. To do a manual recount of them again, you may be dealing with some very fragile